Hi, my name is Dr. Joe Dusseldorp, and I'm a specialist plastic surgeon and a member of the Royal Australasian College of Surgeons. And it's a pleasure to be at the Australian Society of Plastic Surgery meeting, the PSC in Sydney today, interviewing Associate Professor Summer Hanson, who is a plastic surgeon from the University of Chicago, and the director of the research program there, and also a part-time medical device developer. Summer, I'm really excited to hear what you're doing in the field of restoration of sensation for women with having had mastectomies. And I'd love you to tell us a bit about it and tell us what is a bionic breast.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Joe, and thanks for the invitation to be here and to talk a little bit about our passion project at the University of Chicago. The bionic breast is a device that is under development still. Essentially, the goal is to not just restore sensation, but really to preserve it in a way that patients don't even realize that there's been a change. The idea is to preserve that circuit or change that circuit through the device itself connecting to the nerves that have been cut during the mastectomy procedure.
Wow, that sounds amazing. Can I ask, does it involve sensors as well, like in terms of being able to sense tactile feedback? And how does it actually then send a signal to the brain, presumably? Is it a little box, like a cochlear implant, or what is it?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. The big picture, the device, is meant to essentially restore that sensation or preserve that sensation by connecting to the intercostal nerve with an electrode that goes around the nerve. And a lot of this technology is very similar to what is being done in extremity for amputees. It's restoring touch sensation, temperature sensation, trying to mitigate pain. And erogenous sensation is a part that's not necessarily included in extremity reconstruction, but it is one of our goals as well. And essentially the electrode fits around the nerve, the intercostal nerve, and rather than a nerve graft or coaptation or things that we're doing currently, the electrode goes around the nerve and then it connects to a sensor, a flexible sensor that has electrodes within it that will fit under the nipple-areolar complex. That has the potential to be as large or as small as we want it. And so as we're kind of building, that's the part that's not quite done yet. So as we're building these different flexible sensors to essentially record that touch or record that sensation or that input, it could be the whole breast itself. But basically restores that sensation. So whatever the surface of the breast will feel, whether it's the nipple around the areolar complex, the lateral breast, that will all then signal back to that nerve through that electrode and feed back to the brain the same way it would if it were an intact nerve still.
So it's definitely sounds exciting and something which I think would have major ramifications outside of just breast sensation. If this technology is able to be made real whole, and I'm wondering, there must be a regulatory process that's in place to enable that. What kind of launch platform are you on? Are you at a proof of concept stage, or where are you at in the regulatory pathway?
Yes. So the regulatory pathway is extensive. At this point, we do have FDA approval for an investigational device. Some of the technology that we're building off of is already been used in clinical trials for amputees and for upper extremity prosthetics. And so that was kind of easy to translate, but still needs that whole proof of concept, safety and feasibility and whatnot. That portion is FDA approved at this point for safety and feasibility study. The other portion that we're still building is that sensor that I talked about that will go under the nipple-areolar complex or along the chest. And so that's in more of the proof of concept and animal study phase.
Yeah, that's a big piece of the puzzle.
And then there'll be another part of putting it all together.
Yeah. Why is breast sensation so important?
So I think it's something that has very much been overlooked in the reconstructive pathway. And I think that, I'm not sure how it was for you, but when I was in training, it was first you're going to look essentially normal in clothing when you have breast reconstruction, or in a bathing suit or in a bra, it'll look normal. And then we kind of evolved into, well, let's see if we can make things look normal when you don't have any clothes on. Sort of restoring the aesthetics of the breast, but never really focusing on the sensation or the functional component from a women's health perspective. And so I think that that's something where we're just starting to come around to how important that is. And I think that as our techniques in reconstruction evolve from that aesthetic standpoint and really improving on perforator flaps and autologous reconstruction, and even different ways of doing implant-based reconstruction, trying to restore that sensation is really now the kind of the top prize, because it is so important for women from a functional standpoint and a recovery standpoint.
I've definitely experienced a similar thing, and actually it was a patient who came to me and said, "Can you do something about this numbness?" Because it was something that I must admit I wasn't really aware there's a massive issue for women, and then patient support groups as well that really kind of advocate strongly for us to do better in this space. And it seems like you're lifting the bar even higher. So congratulations for that.
Well, and part of what's come out of this process too is just understanding more what that means for women who have gone through the process and have gone through those experiences from a recovery standpoint, and realizing that this is something that I know is likely going to happen, right? We typically have to cut the nerves. And when we talk about potential complications or risks or benefits, that was a very low level of my conversation. It was like, you'll have a change in your sensation or you'll have numbness. And what that really means to patients was just such a spectrum that I didn't appreciate.
I think it's interesting when do you also perform nervetization procedures for the flap and perforated flaps?
Yes.
Yeah, because that was something that I do in my practice, and I've noticed that there's a real reason why patients might fear having a mastectomy is the numbness. And they may choose a lesser operation like a lumpectomy purely for that reason. And even though they may still get numbness after a lumpectomy, perhaps to a lesser degree, but still significant. And so it's one of the things that people are actually sort of using as a decision-making factor, I think.
Yes, I think that if you look at the support groups or if you look at some of the data that we have in the literature about patient-reported outcomes, that's a big impact. That has a big impact. Some people may look at some of those studies to say that breast conservation has higher rates of sexual well-being or physical well-being in the long run compared to mastectomy and implant-based reconstruction in particular. I think that's a big part of it, is that even though aesthetically it may be a different breast, they still have that capacity for sensation that you really don't have with great outcomes right now, especially with implant-based reconstruction.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And do you think that there's reasons why implant-based reconstruction versus autologous reconstruction, even without a neurotization? Do you think there are reasons why there's differences in sensation in those groups? Do you have a feeling about that?
I think some of it has to do with just the technique. And I think even if we do nothing with the nerves, when you have an autologous-based reconstruction, there is still that capacity for regeneration that you're not going to get with an implant, or depending on what your technique is too. If you wrap it with a dermal matrices or some sort of mesh for support, I think that sort of blocks some of that regeneration capacity for the nerves as well. Whereas you give it, a new target in a flap, even if it's not the nerve, but it is some sort of autologous tissue, it may have more capacity for that sensation.
And you also use the cadaveric nerve graft, which is presumably implant-based reconstructions, I guess?
Yeah.
How do you think that's working, and what do you think are the real sort of pros and cons of that technique?
We have a protocol for our patients at the university for that reconstruction because I think that there is a need for more data or better data. And so we have very standard protocols on how we're testing their sensation and their recovery. I do think that it's better than nothing. I think that, if you're giving that nerve guide through the cadaveric nerve graft up to the nipple-areolar complex, I think that does have that capacity as well. It's been interesting to work with the breast surgeons, and they're a little bit more excited about this idea as well, and kind of preserving those nerves and not just clipping them off at the base of the breast or at the level of the fascia. I think that's also a big part of it, I'm sure is having buy-in from the groups that you're working with as well.
Absolutely, yeah, it's a collaborative process. I work with a breast colleague of mine who says that 15 minutes more of her operation could be a lifetime more of sensation for a woman. And so she's happy to spend a bit longer to dissect the nerves and get a bit more length for me to be able to rejoin to. And I think it really be really great if we can try and get better sensory outcomes for implant-based reconstructions. I also have a theory that you've got basically a spacer, silicone spacer. In Australia, we only have silicone implants, and there's really not any feedback if there's nothing in the skin between if something's touching them, and can also feel quite cold, I should say. And so there's lots of elements of sensation. That brings us back to your device. How do you think you'll go at all the different elements of sensing that needs to be done? There's not just light touch, there's obviously temperature and vibration and proprioception and all of the elements that make up sensation. How are you going to go about creating sensors for all of that?
Yep, and that's where this first part of the study is so important with our safety and feasibility testing. Not only the safety and feasibility of the device itself, but we're just gathering that information on the electrodes within the pocket around the intercostal nerve. Because as I said, a lot of this has been used for extremities, and so we have a lot of information on what parts of the median and the ulnar nerve give that different types of feedback.
Right.
We don't know that for the intercostals.
Yeah.
So part of this study right now is to actually have the electrode around the nerve, and then it actually exits out of the body. The wire does, and then that hooks to a connector where we can actually transmit signal. And so we can sort of test where on the nerve or what level of amplitude do we need in order to get a different type of result.
It's fascinating.
And so patients are, God bless these patients for doing this, because then we do have to remove the device because it's not a complete circuit yet. And so they're coming in and they're offering their time and their input and basically what their experience is with the first phase of this.
And these are women who've had mastectomy?
Right, so they are all implant-based reconstruction. They've had their mastectomy, and we're connecting the electrode at the time of the mastectomy, doing the remainder of the reconstruction, and then eventually they'll have a procedure where either their tissue expander is removed and replaced with an implant, and we'll take off the cuff at that point, or they'll have a smaller procedure in the clinic where we remove the cuff.
Yeah, we need people like that to be involved in this kind of basic science research, because otherwise we don't ever really make any advancements. It is a big ask of people though, isn't it?
It is, especially in this one where we're telling them this is all for this future potential. They're not going to have that direct benefit.
A group of patients that want to take part in something amazing like this.
Yes.
Congratulations on a really amazing development, and I really watch this space with interest and would love to learn more about your progress and maybe collaborate one day.
Oh, absolutely.
That'd be great.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And again, thank you for this opportunity and just a chance to experience this beautiful city too. This has been wonderful.